One. It's good? Hey everybody, I'm Drew from the Drewsperience and I'm back, and today, as I said, make sure one thing to say. When you see my channel, hit the like, share, subscribe button because we're growing. I'm trying to grow awareness for Quebec politics in my province and also federal politics. End of the day, it's free and whatnot. And today I'm joined by a very legendary M&A.
Ooh.
She has done so much for NDG. She was taught by the former Prime Minister Paul Martin, who had arguably one of the greatest minds ever to be an amazing Prime Minister. She is a lovely woman. She is a mother. She's a fighter for NDG, for the communities, and does so much. I'm joined by the one, the only Desirée McGraw. It's a pleasure to have you, Desiree.
Thank you, Drew. It's great to be here. We're long overdue, and I'm very excited to be having this conversation here in my office.
I agree, and it's a pleasure to have you on because I love the energy that you bring. Every time when I started getting into political content, the two most in-demand M&As that I've had to get on was Elizabeth Prass-Mine, who I've interviewed. So make sure to check out that interview, by the way, and also yourself because of what you bring, not just for your experience of who you were taught by, but just the accolades you've accomplished for NDG and Quebec.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm always happy to be named with Liz, and just a little story. So my nickname is Des, and she's Liz, Elizabeth Liz, Desiree Des. And for a very long time, and still to this day, people confuse us. So it's like, even in the National Assembly, the president will, like, one of us will stand and be like, La députée de Darcy McGee, or La députée de Notre-Dame-de-Grâce for the other. I think part of it is like my last name's McGraw, and she's got Darcy McGee, which is an Irish name.
Yes.
And then our ridings are adjacent, and sometimes we would wear the same colors. So I'm very happy to be, Liz is not only my neighbor riding, but a dear friend, and I'm very happy to be associated with Liz.
Amazing. Well, she's done amazing. She's running again for the second time, and I love to see the collaboration between Darcy McGee and NDG. It's very important. They're two of Quebec's biggest communities for Anglophones and Allophones, and I have to ask because, we don't have much time, but we'll do part 2 soon. But I have to ask, you were mentored by Paul Martin,
Yes.
and Paul Martin was considered one of the brightest minds under Jean Chrétien, and he wrote the Red Book. He had the economic mind. How did he influence you to become to get into politics?
Wow. Well, I love Paul Martin. Actually, I think there's a lot of parallels between Paul Martin and Mark Carney in that brand of liberals, but we can talk about that later. I met Paul Martin when I was a university student. I was at the Earth Summit in Rio, and he was the Liberal Environment Critic. This is '92, so he was the federal Liberals were still in opposition, and I was the Global Youth Ambassador.
Right.
I took a year off school and worked to raise awareness around this Earth Summit where the climate and the biodiversity conventions were launched. But so we got to know each other then, along with Jean Charest, who was the environment minister. This is where I made this is where I got really interested in politics. I was always interested in politics, but I had a chance to work up close and personal with these politicians, Paul Martin, Jean Charest, Brian Mulroney, of course, was the prime minister at the time, all of whom had an important impact on me. And Paul Martin's case, he asked me then the following year to do an internship to work in his office, but I was off overseas to do a year abroad, and then eventually my graduate studies. The advice I'd received at the time from Tom Axworthy, who was my boss when I was working at the Bronfman Foundation, was, you know what, politics is tough, so go get your credentials, do your graduate studies, develop your own, continue to pursue your own career. And then when you come back to Canada, come back in a position of strength. And then you can basically call the shots in terms of what portfolio you want to work on. But fundamentally, politics for a staffer can be very derivative. You're very dependent on the relationship, the reputation and the performance of the person you're working for. And I never wanted to be in that position. So I did. I followed his advice. I went overseas, worked overseas. And then when I came back to Canada in the early 2000s, Paul Martin, at that point, of course, they'd been in government. He'd been the finance minister. Eventually, he got quit from cabinet and then ran hard for the leadership. And of course, as you know, there are two streams in the federal Liberals. There's the more traditional Chrétien, Trudeau stream, and then there's the Paul Martin, John Turner, I would argue maybe Mark Carney stream, which is both, fiscally conservative, socially progressive, but probably in terms of Quebec, more, pro-Meech Lake, a little less hardline, more, people around Paul Martin included Jean Lapierre and Lisa Frula and Dennis Dawson. These are all strong Quebecers who are nationalist, and so they reconcile the federalism and the nationalism, and that's certainly been an influence on me from Paul Martin. So when I came back to Canada in the early 2000s, he was running for the leadership. He won the leadership, of course. He became the prime minister, and he asked me, what portfolio are you interested in? And of course, I had been working and studied abroad, and then worked abroad in international relations at the London School of Economics. I worked with the Canadian High Commission in London, and then I also so international relations, but also worked as a reporter covering UN negotiations, and then came back and I was teaching at McGill in international development. So the portfolio I wanted was international development. In fact, that's the one I got. I became the senior policy advisor, and then advised to the minister, but advised him directly on international cooperation as well. He had a huge influence on me. One, because he's a really great person. He's a really high quality person, as you say, extremely bright. Very nuanced, he really likes to think things through. And so just as a person, how he is as a parent, how he is with his 3 children, who were of course grown by then, always kind, always very thoughtful. I was just found that he was, just a really great person and very intelligent. I also just liked his brand of politics, which was fiscally responsible, socially progressive. As you know, it was under Paul Martin that Canada adopted the Same-Sex Marriage Act. And I know that for Paul Martin, who's a staunch Catholic, and he would go find a church wherever he was on a Sunday. If he was traveling, he would find the closest church. So a really staunch Catholic. And I think that was personally for him a real journey to come to the place where he was the prime minister who got same-sex marriage through. So I think just seeing his own evolution, how he, as a true liberal, as a liberal, you don't impose your personal views on others, right? That is what a liberal is. You may have very strong views for yourself and about how you want to live your life, but you don't impose that on others. No. And so seeing him in the same-sex marriage, where I know that, again, for him as a Catholic, that was tough, but he worked through it, and I was so impressed with how he stayed true to being what a true liberal means. And also just, very strong on environmental issues, international development. I remember one year after we made a big commitment that we helped develop in the position, this 3x5 initiative with the World Health Organization, Bono. Bono had spoken at his leadership convention.
You too.
Bono then came to visit to congratulate him. So that was also very cool because, Bono, U2, of course, I grew up with that. That's my generation, but I'm of Irish heritage. So there was that whole other connection as well. So many, many highlights, but more than anything, I would say when he stepped down though, so I think 2 things. Paul Martin probably would have done better in a majority government.
Yes.
Because of the way he is. I think Chrétien was more the cut and thrust of politics, and he could have done just fine in a minority government. But Paul Martin was a visionary. He was a big picture guy. He was a kind of broad-minded, and unfortunately he had Chrétien had stayed on and sort of run out the clock, if you will, to some extent, and there was the sponsorship scandal. So people were at that point sick of the federal liberals, and he came in at the tail end. Nothing personal against him, but he just didn't have enough time to accomplish all his big ideas, and he had to negotiate in a minority environment, which I think a majority would have played. I mean, every government wants a majority, but I think some people are able to manage it better, and I think he would have, of course, done better in a majority, and of course, would have stayed in power longer. When he stepped down in 2008,
I thought it was 2006 actually, the election.
Well, so we lost the election in 2006. So we lost the election in 2006, and then he stepped down. He was stayed on his seat as a member of parliament until 2008, which I think is quite something for a prime minister to no longer be leader. There was then an interim leader, and then of course we had a leadership race, and that we could have a whole conversation about that. It was like Stéphane Dion, and when I was Michael Ignatieff and Bob Rae, of course the late great Ken Dryden. Paul Martin stepped down as leader the same night that we lost, and I remember that night very well. And I had just had my first child. He was a month old at that point. It was my first night out of the house, and it was very emotional. In fact, it was quite an emotional night. And he stepped down immediately. He said, I will be stepping down as leader. But he stayed on as member of parliament, which I think is really admirable. But then 2008, when he didn't run again and he announced he was stepping down, we talked about my running in like his seat in LaSalle. But at the time, my son was 2.
Motherhood.
And, you know, and I see a lot of my colleagues grappling with that, you know, get much younger colleagues with younger children. And I made the decision at the time that it was not the right time for me. This was my first child, but I remember he came to my house. We sat down, we met with my husband, and my dad was there, and we had intense discussions about what that would involve. And ultimately, I decided that it wasn't the right time for my family and myself. But it was a real honor that he had approached me about that, and that would have been a great honor to serve in his footsteps. But politics had to wait for another phase of my life, which is where I am now.
And you know, that's amazing. I got to segue into that because, you know, you've really built a reputation for yourself. You know, everywhere I go, your name is like, oh yeah, I love Desiree. Desiree. It's like Desiree Mania. We had Trudeau Mania.
Wow, okay.
And then we got Desiree Mania. And it's like everywhere I go, like, it's like I have friends that are like, it's like, you got to go to her fund. I'm telling, like, if she does a fundraiser, you better go to it because it's got great people. It's got amazing minds, individuals. You can meet a friend. You might meet a significant other, whatever your orientation is. Oh, by the way, speaking of the Same-Sex Marriage Act that he put in, my mom, my late mother was very happy with that because so my mom used to be a designer and she had a lot of friends who were gay that were very kind of like, it was still, okay, we're more ahead in terms of like, you know, acceptance, but we needed that in paper to say like, it doesn't matter. And I just want to say this. As someone who votes conservative, I don't care what your orientation is because I think that was a monumental achievement because if you pay your taxes, it doesn't matter who you marry. Be happy. That's my PSA. Oh, yeah.
I fully agree. And 2004, this was 2004 when the Same-Sex Marriage Act was adopted. I mean, this was ahead of the time. Now it seems like pretty normal, but at the time,
it was a big deal.
It was a big deal. It was a really big deal. In the fundraiser side, let me just say this about my events. One of the things, as you know, Drew, I've been a long time involved in environment and climate issues. So every single one of my special guests at every single one of my fundraisers has been a former environment minister.
Wow.
Clifford Lincoln, Catherine McKenna, Jean Charest, David Hertel. So now for my next fundraiser, 2026, election year, I got to find another former environment minister. Maybe it'll be Stephen Guilbeault. Who knows? But anyway, I haven't put that out yet there to Stephen. I haven't come to see Stephen yet. But it's always been really interesting. And I've always been very deliberate in choosing a former environment minister to be my guest of honor. Very
important. Listen, I think environment is very important too. I think especially too, we are in a different world where we have to look at we have to care about the environment, but also look at how still natural resources can be used to our advantage and take the profits of that and put them into these future projects with AI and also the environment. That's how I view it. But I think it's great what you're doing. So when you...
Just on that, sure. I think the way I look at it, it's called sustainable development. It was coined by the Brundtland Commission going back in 1995. Now that's like 40 years ago. No, 30 years ago. No, it was 85. It was 85. Okay, and then 92 was the Earth Summit. So it was a long time ago. My point is this. Sustainable development basically says it's like a triple bottom line.
Yeah.
So we have to like meet the needs of the current generation without compromising the needs of the future generation. It's pretty simple. And through the prism of the triple, what I call the triple bottom line, every decision we make, policy or otherwise, and I actually think this should be, frankly, our approach in our own platform, is the triple bottom line approach. Is it economically viable? Will it create prosperity? Is it socially responsible and acceptable? And is it environmentally sustainable? And those three things, if we can look at those, the decisions we make and the policies we adopt, it's a pretty good framework.
Agree.
Anyway, that's
amazing, and that's a Paul Martin thing because Paul Martin was a big proponent of pipelines because he saw. Look, he goes, I understand there's a risk with pipelines, but we also need to look at, as you said, the triple bottom.
Triple bottom line.
Triple bottom line.
And
Paul Martin was a proponent of that because I interviewed Dan McTeague, a former Liberal MP.
Yes, Dan McTeague.
I love Dan. He's an amazing guy. Now I love him. He's an amazing guy. And he said Paul Martin was the architect of that, and that's something people don't know. It wasn't Chrétien, it was Martin. Chrétien agreed to it because Martin was the brain. I always felt Paul Martin was like a GM of a hockey team that just had the brain to build a long-term foundation for success. So that's why. Yeah.
And he did, right? Because he and Chrétien, despite their sort of falling out, they were great political partners. I mean, Paul Martin was the finance minister who got the deficit in line, who put Canada back on track, who we had, the protected the banks. So when crises hit, Canada was well protected. Paul Martin put all of that in place. And I think they actually achieved great things together. I wish he had been prime minister longer because I think he is a great person and was a great prime minister for the time he was there, but I think he was, of course, hamstrung by the minority and not being able to implement a bigger, broader, longer-term vision.
You had two things. You had the merger of the reformist with the PCs, and then you had a burgeoning up and coming NDP with the late charismatic Jack Layton. It was such an era. What an era! Like, I think that was the golden era. It's like, and then it's like when I tell people, like, this is when I sort of got into politics as a nerd, because I was 10 to 12 years old at the time, but my dad was very into it because he was he lived in the States, so he was like a Republican, like a Bush Senior style Republican. Not junior, senior.
We'll take it. I'll take that today, any day over Donald Trump. Am I allowed to say that? I'm not sure. I'm going to say it,
I'm not, listen, I'm not a controversial interviewer, so everyone has their opinion, so I'm not here to,
I'm the international relations critic, so I have to be diplomatic, but I
just want to say this. My show is not for controversy or views or clicks. It's for credibility and relationships. We might have different views, but the point is to have dialogue instead of division. Because if we have division, then we can't get stuff done. Thank you for understanding this matter. I'm getting good at this.
Well, and just on that, my parents are actually from the States, and my dad's from Minnesota, where we've seen a lot of the turmoil unfolding. And I have cousins on. We think the referendum is divisive in Quebec, right? Well, MAGA and Trump are pretty darn divisive. So in Minnesota, my cousins, just in my own cousins, I have one cousin, so many Democrats, including a cousin who was a Democrat senator, and then I have many who are involved in MAGA. So it's very divisive, and hopefully
it resolves itself.
They'll figure a way forward.
But we got to take it back to Quebec now, because this is very important, because you decided to run as an MNA. You've done very well. NDG. What are the biggest biggest concerns you hear from your constituents? But what is the most positive things you're hearing from your constituents?
Well, first I have to say NDG is my heart and my home. It's where this riding is where I was born and raised. It's where my husband was born and raised. It's where we're raising our own family.
Amazing.
And I care deeply about this community. And in fact, when I made the decision not to run in Paul Martin's seat in 2008, when he stepped down, it was, yes, I had my first child, he was 2 at the time, but it wasn't NDG. And I've actually been, and some of my friends have criticized me maybe for being too rigid or old school, but I actually feel, for me, other people can do what they want. For me, it was always important to represent my own community. And also just practically as a mom who's very involved in my community, the idea of commuting to another city, representing another riding, and being involved in my community, I couldn't make it work. So NDG itself, and the opportunity to run in NDG, when I was approached, when the wonderful, my predecessor, Kathleen Weil, was stepping
I remember
down.
her. I almost forgot about her. She's important.
Oh, she's great. I'm still in her office, So, she's fantastic, and she continues to mentor me, and I call her, and she gives me advice. So respect must be paid. She was the first woman MNA for NDG as well, so she was a trailblazer in that sense. But when I was asked to run an NDG, that was a critical part of my decision to run. In fact, as I say, it was always about NDG. I had the opportunity to run federally in other ridings as well, including when I was living out west. But for me, running in my own community was not only a practical matter, but also just a matter of principle for me. So that being said, love NDG. It's my heart and my home. And your question was, sorry, what would have?
What are the concerns of today that your constituents have that you hope to address this year in an election year? Because it's a big election year. We have a upcoming PQ. The CAC. I mean, they're kind of. I mean, Legault resigned, and we don't know what they're going to bring. Maybe they might have some sort of a small resurgence. Not really. But what's the biggest concern you're hearing from your constituents right now?
So NDG is perceived to be an affluent community, and many parts are affluent.
Right.
But 27% of our residents actually live below the poverty line.
Oh, wow.
It's higher than the average in Montreal, and that's a little-known fact, as Cliff Clavin from Cheers would say. It's a little-known fact. It's a little-known fact, and so there's a huge issue around people making ends meet. I mean, even middle-class families are struggling with making ends meet. The cost of living, housing in particular, food insecurity. The NDG Food Bank, for the first time in its history in the last year, has had to turn people away.
Wow.
So that's unheard of. So one, the cost of living is huge, even for all levels, certainly those who are low income, but also the middle class as well. So that's a major issue. And housing, of course, is a driver, and lack of access to affordable housing and social housing. So there's many projects we're working on in NDG around promoting social housing. 3 in particular, there have been 3 failed social housing projects in NDG that have shuttered or closed in the last few years and have not been resurrected. So we're working hard to get those back so that families can stay, because many families can't access NDG, but many are having to leave because they can't afford it.
Right.
And the reality is we have great public schools
Yes.
here, we have great public services, and so those families have to leave, those social ties, their neighbors, their schools. So that's heartbreaking. So one, cost of living, which of course is across everyone, but NDG is not exempt. And as I say, the 27% of our residents living below the poverty line, and there's pockets around sort of concentrated areas around West Haven and Benny and Walkley and St. Raymond and others, and they have community centers associated with them. So we're looking at launching an NDG community fund, which is a bit of a salt-tight NDG, working with community partners, the NDG Community Council. Anyway, I've been happy to advise on that, and the community is going to be hopefully taking that forward, and I'm happy to support it. So there's that. I think the other issues are around, there's specific issues like Villa Maria. There's issues, of course, a lot of English speakers, eligibility, access to education. I also deal with issues around adoption now that Quebec has essentially closed its, declared a moratorium on other countries. Many of these families are now in the domestic system, and so they're experiencing challenges. Falaise Saint-Jacques, so there's a whole green bridge, that whole area reclaiming Falaise Saint-Jacques. But I would say, and of course, access to healthcare.
Yes.
I mean, that's a big issue.
Oh my God, Bill 2, and thank you. By the way, thank you for really fighting for Bill 2. Because I have a friend, like you and Lizzie have been amazing on this, because I had a friend who has a disabled son and with semi-functioning autism, like level 2 as the saying is. They lost their specialist when that bill was announced, and it's like, so thank you for fighting and continue to fight, because the PQ is going to bring in a zombified version of that, and we can't allow that. I could lose my doctor. I could lose other specialists. We can't allow that, because we're known for our brilliant doctors.
Well, they've come back from the edge, but the CAC has already done so much damage through this new law, and we've already lost many doctors.
Yep.
We know that we've lost doctors. Many have retired early. They've left the province.
Yep.
They've gone private. They've already done serious damage, and some of the doctors that are particularly impacted, I know it's widespread, but of course, English-speaking doctors have the opportunity to go anywhere, really. And I mean, the CAC doesn't seem to understand basic economics 101, laws of supply and demand. Low supply of doctors, high demand. So you don't just call the shots and put these unacceptable terms. So absolutely, we opposed Bill 1, and now the CAC is trying to walk that back. And I just think in general, and this comes back to NDG, NDGers are on the receiving end of so much of the CAC's bad policies, right? Total mismanagement of our public finances, so a $14 billion deficit, which is unheard of in Quebec history. Total mismanagement of our public services, and essentially a breach of the social contract. In Quebec, we accept at a certain point to pay higher taxes, the highest in North America, in exchange for services. Well, now we have the highest taxes, a huge deficit, and services are failing. So that's a big issue. I think also I have in my riding Concordia, so the Loyola campus of Concordia, and I would say the cuts to the universities, but also the tuition hikes and all of the impacts on the universities. I think I have more students, alumni, faculty, and staff of those universities than any other riding in Quebec, other than downtown and Westmount. We have them here, and so I'm hearing from a lot of constituents about the impacts of those devastating policies that have targeted our institutions. Not just individuals, but our institutions are being targeted, and one of them is right here at Loyola campus. Of course, the MUHC, the Glen is in my campus as well, and so obviously the impact of Bill 2 and the whole mismanagement of healthcare. Before that, you had Projet de Loi 15. So it's a total mess, and the CAC has made a complete mess of things. It's not a serious government, and you know, we've got a lot of work to do, and NDG is not exempt from that.
And that's why you're the voice. So I got to ask this now, last question, because I said we got a lot to discuss, but in a short time, because I gotta rush to work after. You know, this is just a
Like
side
got
project.
the day job, yeah.
It's like So I got to ask. You know, Charles Milliard is running as leader. I saw you at
Yes.
How do you say it, Yan?
Yamashish.
Yamashish. Thank you.
Yamashish.
Yamashish. Yan's who's her amazing colleague, is helping make sure the filming goes good, but he helps me pronounce it when I need
Yes,
it. So
it's the comms guru.
The comms guru, yeah. So Yamashish. So I was there. I saw you. I saw Liz. I saw Michelle. It was a great gathering. And what do you feel Charles brings as a leader in an election year? Because he brought in some very good ideas.
So great question. I think a positive note to end on. So yesterday was Super Bowl. So I was, at a Super Bowl party here in the riding. I mean, everything happens in the riding.
Yes.
But I would say since over the holidays, what I've been hearing more than anything from my constituents here in NDG and in Montreal West is you've been through difficult times. Obviously, the end of last year was very difficult. But what they've said is we don't have the luxury. You Liberals do not have the luxury of being divided or disorganized. We have the most consequential election of a generation is upon us now, this year in 2026. We've got to give it our very best shot, and we've got to rise to the challenge. We had our worst defeat, I hope, ever in 2022. This is behind us. We rebuilt slowly, quietly rebuilding, doing serious work, holding the government to account. We went through a leadership race. Obviously, we're not going to go into all of that, but that was very difficult, I think, for our party. I think, objectively speaking, it was very difficult. This is the second leader that we lost in a short period of time. And now we have Charles, who on Friday will officially become our leader, unopposed. And I'm excited. The whole caucus is behind him. I think he is very intelligent. Looping back to the Paul Martin conversation, that kind of intelligence, and he's also a very strong communicator. Yes, he has not yet been elected to anything, although he will soon become, hopefully, the MNA for Orford and then eventually the Premier of Quebec. But he's so intelligent, and he's such a strong communicator, and he has real leadership skills. Like, he is managed and led, and just in my conversations with him and how I see him interacting with others, he has real leadership qualities. I think Quebecers are going to be very pleasantly surprised by Charles Milliard. And he also has very deep roots in the party, which I think has been important for his leadership. So I think people, like right now the polls are showing he's perhaps not having a background in politics.
He's an outsider,
maybe a good thing right now.
Yes.
And I actually think he's going to perform extremely, extremely well.
Me too.
I think people are in for a very pleasant surprise with Charles Milliard. The other thing I've noticed, even from when he ran in the leadership last year to now, he's gotten so much stronger and better. He was great to start with, but he's smart, and part of being smart is you're a fast learner. And I can see him, even from one interview to the next or one event to the next, he's a fast learner. Well, if you want to succeed, you've got to be able to learn and adapt
learn on the fly
quickly. And so I'm very impressed by his intelligence and his ability to adapt. And I think even just in his way with people, it's a very different way than other leaders. It's his way. It's very authentic. He really listens to people. But then he makes a decision, and he's very strong and clear in moving forward. And so, I'm excited about Charles, and I think Quebecers are gonna like him a lot. So it's gonna be good.
Just a little story before we end it, basically. So Charles, I went to his thank you party for when he ran as leader, and I remember this, as you said, he's so authentic with people. So he comes up to me and he gives me a handwritten card that said, "Thank you so much," and he put his arm on me and he goes, "Thank you so much for helping me win Darcy McGee in my leadership bid." And he said, "Listen," he goes, "you have a talent," and he goes, "Don't give it up, don't squander it." He goes, there might be something for you in politics." He goes, "I don't know it yet, but keep plugging away." And he goes, "You do a podcast I saw." He goes, "This is where you should start doing." And that always stuck with me. So Charles has a way of making people feel valued, and he has a way of helping people feel that he shows that authenticity, and it's not fake.
Yes. He's your story says it beautifully, and obviously, you know, Drew, you're much younger than I am. I think even his approach with young people, and I've seen it with my staff, and how he goes out of his way to talk to them and ask what their interests are, what their plans are. That's a gift in terms of just your human skills, your people skills, which is super important, critically important for a leader. And I think he's got that magic touch with young people, with the next generation, which I think is so important. We're seeing in polls right now, a lot of polls are showing that Quebec youth are pro-sovereignty. My view on that is that it's not actually pro-sovereignty. It's kind of the young people want to believe in something bigger than themselves, and they're confronted with climate change and now geopolitical instability and cost of living and economic uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty. It's so tough, and many young people coming out of COVID, and that really impacted their schooling, their social interactions. They're looking for something bigger than themselves. And the sovereignty thing is it's the quick fix in Quebec. But I don't believe it's actually sovereignty. I think coming forward with a vision that's going to inspire a new generation of young people, I think Charles can do that. And I think that's incredibly important. It's not about sovereignty. It's about something bigger than ourselves. And I think young people in particular are, and you know, maybe in closing, what's motivated me in my life, other than NDG, of course, my heart and my home, is the next generation. Not just as a parent, but even myself got involved, even in university, even high school, actually, in global issues. And my passion is really educating and engaging the next generation around national and global issues. And so that's a shared passion, I think, that I have with Charles. And I'm excited and I'm optimistic and excited to be able to present to Quebecers, in particular young Quebecers, our vision for Quebec for the future. I think it's going to be very compelling.
Amazing. Desiree, where can people connect with you if they want to ask questions or they want to hear your platform, the QLP's platform for this year and the most pivotal election of a generation?
Yes, it's the most consequential election of a generation, no question. So I have a website, desireemcgraw.ca, that links to all of my social media, but I'm on all the social media platforms. There's my writing office. I don't even know the number by heart, but it's here on Monkland and NDG, and we're always available and accessible. So so please, probably the website's the easiest way to connect with all the different ways of interfacing, desireemcgraw.ca.
Amazing. And guys, if you like what I do, follow the Drewsperience on all platforms. Views are my own, by the way. I want to make that very clear, because remember, I vote conservative, but I have amazing friends on the other side, and we could still get along at the end of the day. This is why I do this podcast. It's dialogue over division, and hopefully we can find a way to make our province, Quebec, better, and our country, Canada, an amazing superpower, because I believe we have the potential to be the South Korea of North America militarily. Environmentally and also economically. So that's why the triple, what's it called? The triple?
Well, the triple bottom line.
The triple bottom line.
Or the triple threat. Performing artists will be like, I'm the triple threat. They sing, dance, and act. But we can be like the triple threat, the economic, clean energy superpower. There's so much we can do. Potential for sure. We just gotta stay together. We gotta keep Quebec in Canada.
Yes.
We gotta keep Canada together. And that's critically important. So that's our job as the Federalist Party in Quebec, the Liberals, is to keep us solid and keep Quebec within Canada.
Amazing. And with that, hit the like, share, subscribe button. Drewsperience out. Good.